So we are going to wrap up placing our authorization request to get a bearer token for the Twitter API. And to do this, we are going to create a post request. So we're going to be using the request library to do that. And so we've already set up all of our URLs and parameters, so it's actually pretty simple from here. All we have to do is specify what type we want what type of request we want to issue, which is of course a post request, and we'll be using our auth. We're going to be targeting our auth URL. That's our endpoint. Our headers, the value of our headers is going to be our auth headers variable that we've structured, and our data is going to be the data params variable. Now, to check that we get what we're looking for, obviously here is a 200 status. If we get a 200 status, everything turned out okay, and we can move on to actually issuing some requests with the body of that bearer token. So to do that, we can just do a print on the status code. Okay, and so now I'm just going to switch over to terminal and check it out, see if it looks like everything went okay. So pull up my terminal window here, and I'm just going to run Twitter API demo. Oh, looks like I've got an error. Okay, line 18. What did I leave out here? Content type. Oh, whoops. Yep. Missing some quotes there. Let's try it again. Okay. 200 status code. Everything is fine. That's fantastic. We now have a bearer token. So with that bearer token, second task. Actually request some tweets. So the example that I followed in this case actually looks at the search API and uses a query term. I instead wanted to look at individual users. You all can do whatever you like. You should be doing something different than what I'm doing here or what's in that demo. But anyhow, so I'm first going to make sure that I have direct access to that access token because I'm going to need to append it to my request. So to do that, I'm just going to say so I'm going to say bearer token r.json, and the parameter name is actually access token in this case, which I will need to wrap in quotes. Okay, so there in a variable is my access token. So now that I've decided that I want to work with user statuses, I'm going to need to change my my target endpoint a little bit. So my base URL obviously remains the same. It's still an API call, but what I want to be looking at is is going to be users. Tweets. So get tweet time. This is why it's annoying. I'm going to look at API reference. I don't need the access tokens. I'm not working in authentication anymore. Let's see. Maybe tweets. Post, retrieve, and engage. I just want to. I think I want to get tweet timelines. Status as mentions. Returns to post by authenticating user, except I'm not an authenticating user. So maybe it's under search. Oh, and now I'm back here. This is the worst. So I don't actually want to search the tweets. I could search the tweets and I could use query parameters, but I'm looking for the statuses. I guess it's this. I think it's this. Yeah, okay. Get status as user timeline. So again, navigating API documentation is a thing. So this is actually what I'm looking for because I want to be able to target a specific user. As you can see, there are a whole lot of different things because you might want to be monitoring mentions, you might want to be monitoring retweets, you might be able to whatever. In this case, as I said, I'm going to focus on a specific user. So back to my Python file here, I'm going to say, I'm going to create something called tweet URL. Okay, and that is going to be a combination. So just the same way that I had the auth URL, I'm going to take this, but instead of using the auth token endpoint, I'm going to use this. I think I just do from the statuses part. No, maybe it's from the 1.1. Right, because that's where the slash starts. That is correct. Okay, so now I have the URL that I'm targeting and I can start constructing the parameters that I want to pass to it. So I'm just going to do this in a very basic way. I'm just going to go for a specific user and I'm going to look for, I'm going to get like 2 tweets because why not? I can obviously change it later if I want to. So even though this is a GET request, I still have to authenticate, right? This is why I went through that whole rigmarole of getting that bearer token. So I'm going to say, let's say, let's call this tweet, tweet headers. Okay, so again, I'm going to be constructing a header object here, and I believe it's authorization, and in this case, instead of basic, it's going to be bearer. Oops, hang on. Format, and then I'm going to put my bearer token in there. And now, of course, I have to specify my actually, okay, sorry, I'm going to change this. I'm going to make this timeline. It's actually very important to me that variable names be descriptive because that is, although you all are going to do beautiful, beautiful commenting documentation anyway, it's just another clue for what the heck is going on. Because as you may have, many of you may have already experienced, generally once you get, I would say 7 days away from something, if that, you completely forget what it does, and especially if it's been longer, it's really important to have that. It's also a really important aspect of doing this kind of work in teams because you may not be the person who needs to debug, modify, reuse, adapt your code. And so, especially in journalism, we're always working collaboratively. And believe me, you do not want to get the call at 1 a.m. because something isn't working and you're the only one who knows what's going on. So this is a gift to yourself, both your future self in many ways, as well as to the people that you work with. And that's a really important part of kind of the professional practice of doing this sort of work within the newsroom. So the timeline parameters that I am going to pass, I have a couple of options. The ones that I'm going to focus on, again, is I'm going to go by screen name. Okay, so I can just say screen name, and then I'm going to give a count. I'm just going to get a couple, as I said, as a demonstration. So screen name, in my case, oh goodness, who should we look at? I'm going to do a count of 2, as I've mentioned, so that's an easy one. Let us see. So I guess for kicks, I'll just choose Emily Bell, obviously the director of the Tao Center, also an excellent tweeter, and just see what she's posted lately. Now, as a preview, before we actually issue this request and get the results, it's worth pointing out that there is an enormous amount of information contained in these responses. So here is an example response, okay? If you tried to grab this and then like print it to your terminal, it would just be, it's completely unreadable, right? So what you can see, there's a huge quantity of data that's provided with this. I mean, it gets all the way into even So it's in reply to, so is it part of a conversation, how many followers, how many people have favorited it, the profile background color. So all of this is contained in each item. It's a little bit exhaustive, more than a little bit exhaustive, but obviously the part that we are concerned with, or the part that I am concerned with in this case, is just the text of the tweet, which you can find right here at the top, okay? So all I'm gonna do, obviously, is just loop through and just print out the text of the tweet. Obviously, you can think, I imagine that you can think of many ways in which you could analyze this data to make more sophisticated inferences by looking at some of these other parameters. So that's something to keep in mind as you start reading API documentation, is to be thinking about, okay, what kind of insights might collecting this data and analyzing it offer, right? That's kind of the reason why we're here. So in doing that, I'm first going to issue my request. So I'm going to call this timeline request. So it's going to be a request, and it's going to be a get type. My URL is going to be my tweet URL. Okay, the headers is going to be the timeline headers. And the data is going to be the timeline parameters. Whoops, wrong. Timeline params, okay? And that's pretty much it. Once I get that request, I just need to pull the JSON from it, okay? Which actually, haha, I overlooked that. I actually don't need to import JSON. It's native now. So I'm gonna create it, and then I'm just gonna say for a tweet in, whoops, I might want to create a variable there. Tweet data in tweet data. And now I'm just gonna print this. Obviously, I could write it to a file or something like that. I'm just going to print the text that it contains. And we'll run this now, probably get some errors, but other than that, we'll just tweak it and see if we can't get it up and running. So, where do we fail? Line 45. Timeline request, get JSON. All right, hang on one second. Okay, so after casting around a bit, what I've discovered is that this is the wrong parameter. I shouldn't be passing it as data. I should be passing this as params, and I think that will take care of it. So that's a good thing to do to check our documentation again. It should show an example request. Yeah, well, anyway, when we're doing a post request, it goes in as data. When we're doing a get request, it's parameters, which makes sense. So while up here I was just being quick about it, and so while up here I used data, here I need to use params. And now, hopefully, we should have a little bit more success. So let's try this again. Okay, so here we have the last two tweets that Emily tweeted. So again, the purpose of this is just to kind of illustrate the basics of how we would go about constructing a script that would give us the information that we're looking for. Obviously, we could use this to target users. We could use this to target search terms, hashtags, anything that we want. We won't go into this week. We won't go into how to then use this. One of the things that we might want to do with this is obviously set up something like a cron job, right, to repeatedly query this, to repeatedly execute such queries, at whatever interval is appropriate and won't be rate limited by Twitter, in order to keep track of an issue. And at some point, if it's useful, we'll also go through how to then obviously use Python to create some structured data out of this that we could then analyze and make some statements about. But as I said, APIs are one of the most common ways of obtaining data from the web. The other one, which is web scraping, is something that we'll look at next week. Obviously, you may choose to use existing libraries in order to manage the authentication here, but I think as you can see, it's actually fairly straightforward to construct a base file on your own. The one thing that you'll want to watch out for, of course, is that you can get rate limited on the request for the bearer tokens. So really what you want to do is cache that bearer token and just reuse it for a while. You can also invalidate them and things like that. But for the most part, you can, here's my random print statement. But for the most part, you can generate them and then keep them handy somewhere. So anyway, we will go over this tomorrow, and for next week, what we'll be looking at is doing documentation of APIs, and you can set up some sample scripts yourself, which will of course be fully customized and beautifully commented. All right, looking forward to seeing you all soon.